Hello and welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop solution for an English medium UPSC Civil Services aspirant. As part of your weekly current affairs quiz today, we'll be discussing 8 important articles out of the newspaper which deal with different aspects of science and technology, international relations, history, and art and culture. When we talk about the purpose of this quiz, we try to cover articles which have been not covered under the DNA, and we try to do it through questions so that you understand how we can make questions on certain newspaper articles. And more than that, this allows us to create a certain symbiotic relationship between static and current affairs. Now, before we begin our quiz today, a very important announcement for you with regards to your preparation. This may be a very important and golden opportunity to join the Unacademy family vis-a-vis the UCSC, which is the Unacademy Civil Services Championship test, which will happen at 2 times, which is 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. on 7th April, which is this Sunday. And this can give you up to 90% scholarship. And over and above that, there are prizes such as a MacBook, laptops, mobile phones, and even gift vouchers. If you find our courses may be a little bit unaffordable, this may be the way you can become a part of our course. And over and above that, this also allows you to test your knowledge. And whilst doing that, you also get a chance to get a scholarship more than 60% up to 90%. With this, I also want to announce that we have a new batch coming up on April 6th, which is Geography by Mukesh sir. And in the evening batch, he will be teaching geography and all the contours related to it. So if you want to be part of our course, a very golden opportunity to join at this point. With this, let's look at the topics we are going to cover today. The first one, we'll be discussing the India's first solar observatory. All these topics will be covered through questions. Then we have the US sanctions on Russian oil, the Vaikom Satyagraha and Lalit Kala Academy, History and Art and Culture, Modern India and Art and Culture. We'll also have an incident which has happened recently in a certain part of the world. I will not tell you, that will give away the question itself. Then we have the TB report, H5N1, and the Great Indian Bustard, which was in the news. And the Indian Express is the main source of these questions in that regard. The topic, the source is also mentioned in the PPT. With this, let's start the first question. Consider the following statements. Kodaikanal Solar Observatory was established by the British East India Company. The droughts in the Madras Presidency in the last quarter of 19th century led to the establishment of this observatory. Today, the Kodaikanal Solar Observatory, KOSO, works under the Indian Meteorological Department as an important observatory for solar research. Which of the statements are correct? Are 1, 2, 3, or none of them correct? Now, this question is based on a very interesting explained article which came in the examination. I give you a second to look at the question and come up with your answer. And with this, let's look at the idea which is based on the topic itself. So, this is coming from the Indian Express related to geography and science and technology. India's first solar observatory is set to complete 125 years, and therefore it becomes generally important when it comes to anniversaries. And therefore, it is important that you remember about the Kodaikanal Solar Observatory. It is technically not the first solar observatory, but it is a proper observatory which was established via the merger of two things. Because the first observatory which was established by the British in India is in 1792, and that was with the British East India Company, and it was in Madras. Later, in 1882, Kodaikanal was chosen as the place to establish a solar observatory, and this was the Solar Physics Observatory, and both these observatories are merged together. And therefore, it has been established in 1889. 1889 tells us that the first statement becomes incorrect because 1889 is not the period of the East India Company, that is Crown Rule period. Therefore, it has been established by the British government of India vis-a-vis the action of the Crown, not East India Company. Thereafter, the second thing is, why did it come into existence? The answer to that question comes out of, yes, the droughts which happened in Madras Presidency and Mysore in 1875 and that last quarter of 19th century. There were multiple droughts and failures in this sector between 1875 to 1877. and this warranted a need for an observatory. Why solar? Because solar activities can have a very important impact on the environment itself, on the atmospheric pressure and atmospheric upper air circulations, and solar flares or solar events, surface events can have a major impact in that sense. And therefore, this meant that there was a need to understand solar power, and solar observation became important. Now, a very interesting aspect which has been told in the article is that why did they not choose, for example, Leh, Mussoorie, and Shimla? All three were under consideration. The problem was for solar observation, you need clear skies and good weather, which was basically not available in this sector. And therefore, Kodaikanal was chosen as the place for solar observation. Now, today, the KOSO is actually not a part of the IMD. It was separated from the Indian Meteorological Department, and it is working as a separate entity, under the name of Indian Institute of Astrophysics. On 1st April 1971, this division was created. Therefore, based on the information which we get out of this article, you can understand that the answer to this question is only one of the statements is correct, which is the answer is A. This statement is incorrect because British East India Company did not establish it. It was established in 1889. Therefore, the East India Company is not in the picture itself. The second would be, yes, Madras Presidency droughts were the ones which warranted the need to create it. And last but not the least is KOSO today is not part of the IMD, is a separate entity altogether. So the answer becomes A. So you can see a very simple straightforward article, but very interesting aspects have come out of it with regards to a very three-statement based question, which is quite representative of the pattern of the examination. So I hope that now you understand what is the modus operandi in which we are going to work. The questions are based on current affairs articles, and the way we are going to go forward is I will give you time to answer in your mind, then I will explain to you how we go forward. So the second question is with regards to the Russia-India oil relation. India's oil imports from Russia have been steadily increasing in the last 3 quarters. Before Russia's occupation of Ukraine, which has been seen as a major point of change, Russia was India's third largest oil supplier after Iraq and Saudi Arabia. So we have to know which is the correct statement. First statement deals with the recent trend which is there with regards to India taking a lot of oil from Russia. And second is before this moment, before Russia's occupation of Ukraine, what was the relationship of Russia vis-a-vis as an oil importer to India, as an oil exporter to India? So the question is very straightforward. I give you again a second to think about it, what should be the answer, and then we'll move forward. Now, when we talk about the first statement, this seems to be true. This seems to be true because of the fact that it looks like that would be the case. However, the article which talks about how there are now further American sanctions and G7 sanctions on Russian oil because Russia is selling oil at a price which has not been decided by the G7 countries itself, and therefore the sanctions in that regard have led to India to reduce its import from Russia because one of the most important exporters or the most important source, which is Comfort, has actually been sanctioned, and Indian oil refiners are now reluctant to take from this producer. And therefore, in the past 3 quarters, we have seen that there's a decrease in the oil imports. You don't need to know the exact numbers, but there has been a decrease in that regard. Second is prior to the Ukrainian war, Russia was a marginal player, not even third, fourth, fifth, very marginal player it was, and therefore the second statement becomes incorrect because Russia is now a major partner. In the first three after Iraq and Saudi Arabia, India has also diversified its oil imports quite a lot. But before the Ukrainian occupation, when there were no sanctions on Russia, we were not taking oil from Russia at the quantum we are taking today. And therefore, this becomes the context in which basically both the statements become incorrect and the answer becomes D. As of right now, it has not been steadily increasing. It has been going down and generally it decreased. Second, there is no way Russia was the third or biggest oil supplier to India in that sense. It was a marginal player, and that would mean that it was in the not even the top 10 at that point of time, which tells you how things change in geopolitics and how geopolitics can have such a big impact in the larger context of how India has made sure that its energy security is now diversified and we are not dependent on 1 to 2 countries. And more than that, we are making sure from the OECD countries itself, we are taking at least 50-60% from 5 to 6 different sources. Okay, now this question, again, based on trends, and over and above that, trend-based questions are becoming more and more important in the examination. So I hope that you will make sure that you remember these trends. The numbers don't matter. The numbers don't matter. What matters is the trend. Remember this point because it is very, very important for your preparation. When you know the trends, most of the questions can be managed. After this, let's look at the third question. In the Kalinada session of the INC, a resolution was passed to take up anti-untouchability or a fight against untouchability as a key issue. In 1924, note this date, in 1924, the Maharaja of Travancore opened the gates of the temples to lower castes due to the Vaikom Satyagraha. The context of this question is basically Vaikom Satyagraha, and we need to know which is the correct statement. Again, I give you 30 seconds to think about it and decide what should be the answer for this question. And then we'll talk about the context. So think about it. Okay. Now that you've made your mind, let's look at the statements. The first is a very obscure INC session, but related to the Vaikom Satyagraha very closely. And second one is Maharaja of Travancore changing a certain rule. Now, the context for this question is the Vaikom Satyagraha. Vaikom Satyagraha is related to the temple entry movement which happened in South India specifically. We already know that from Sri Narayan Guru, and thereafter because of Periyar's actions and his thought, the self-respect movement, the justice movement, and the Aripuram movement all were about how access to God should not be the monopoly of certain people or at least the Brahmanical community. And therefore, the actions of or the thought of Periyar, E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, and his push for anti-Brahmanism led to a major moment in Indian history when it came to in 1924. And basically, this question is based on the centenary, 100 years of the Vaikom Satyagraha. In 1924, a 600-day Satyagraha was started by T.K. Madhavan. And the concept is very simple. Because temples in South India did not allow untouchables and lower castes to even walk on the roads along temples based on notions of purity, this was called the temple entry movement. First was to get the right to walk on the roads around it, and thereafter to enter the temples and not be debarred on caste. Now, the article is quite interesting because it gives us a lot of details. So when we talk about remembering the Vaikom Satyagraha, 100 years of it, a very interesting explained article out of the Indian Express itself, the starting point of this is given, wherein T.K. Madhavan was the one who took up this issue vis-a-vis fighting for entry into the temple. They very strategically worked around it. Even Gandhi was involved in this movement. And the first statement is actually correct. It is based on a very important concept of Vaikom and this session, which is called the 1923 session at Kalikana, the Kalinada session itself. Here, the Kerala Provincial Congress Committee was asked to take up anti-untouchability as a key issue. So the first statement is actually correct. Please remember, the Kalinada session is not mentioned in most of the books. It is important because it becomes relevant for your preparation vis-a-vis modern India. Now that you have to take care of this session, and over and above that, you should also know about the anti-untouchability aspect, which was taken as a resolution. Second is related to the outcome. And when we talk about the outcome, in 1924, the Raja of Travancore actually did not open the temples for lower castes. In 1924, the only thing which happened was the people who had got arrested or were the Satyagrahis who fought against the temple entry were actually released after the death of the Maharaja of Travancore by the regent Queen Setu Lakshmi Bai. And therefore, the second statement is incorrect because it is related to an outcome which happened in 1936. It is in 1936 that the Maharaja of Travancore opened the temples to the lower caste, and it was for the first time that temple access was given. In between all of this, there was also a compromise which Gandhi came up with, which was that when she only released the prisoners, in 1925, he made 3 roads to the temple open, and one was still closed for the Brahmins in that regard. And therefore, the Vaikom Satyagraha shows a certain progression. So here you should remember the 1923 session, the Kalinada session, the 1924, what we call as regent deciding to release every prisoner, then the 1936 and 1925. 1925 is when Gandhi comes up with the compromise, and 1936 is when you get the last and major breakthrough in the form of temple entry. So if you look at the question, this statement is correct, this statement is incorrect, and therefore the answer becomes 1. And we had to find the correct options. So the first is Kalinada, totally correct. Second, this should have been 1936. Again, I'm repeating myself. You should remember 1923 session Kalinada, 1924 releasing of Satyagrahis, 1925 the what we call as the compromise of Gandhi, and then 1936, which is related to no one else but the Raja of Travancore opening everything up for the lower caste in the Vaikom sector. So this is important. This is very interesting, and this is very, very important for all students who look for current affairs to see where static is going. So if you get a question on Vaikom Satyagraha, if you get a question on the Kalinada session, don't be surprised in 2024 or even in 2025 with 100 years of the Vaikom Satyagraha being celebrated. After this, let's look at the next question. The next question is based on a very straightforward question, an incident which is going to impact the automobile industry of the world because of the port which is now closed. It says the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which was recently in the news, is located in. It's an easy question in the context of what is happening right now. But in the context of the examination, it generally becomes difficult because what happens is you generally don't know with so much details such small things. So you have Houston, Texas, Baltimore, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, or Detroit, Michigan. I'm again giving you 30 seconds. Think about it, and then we'll talk about the context of this article. Let's see. Okay, so it's a very straightforward thing because here the answer is Baltimore, Maryland. The Baltimore Bridge, which is the Francis Scott's Key Bridge, was basically struck by a container ship, which has in turn led to the destruction of the bridge itself. Now, what has happened is the Baltimore port itself is very significant because a lot of automobile machinery and parts are actually going out of Baltimore itself. So if you look at it, it is one of the busiest ports in the US, manages 8.5 lakh auto and light trucks and farm and construction machinery. India also sends close to 2 billion worth of auto components and imports and exports from that port itself. And there's a concept that this may lead to a supply chain issue in the world and could impact the auto and coal outputs, specifically auto prices in the world. So this shows how a very small event can have an impact on the whole world. Basically, with the world connected together, with the world which is now based on what we call as integrated global economies, intricately connected together, a small incident, though for Baltimore it is a very big one, but in the context of the world, it is being argued that this is equivalent to the Panama Canal being closed or the Suez Canal being closed. And therefore, this is a very major development with regards to it. The question has been easy. First 3 questions which I asked you were a little bit difficult. This one is a little bit easier, but can come in the examination also. This again to revise, remember Baltimore, but also remember that it has an impact, a cascading impact on the global supply chain That was, it is also significantly important to understand in that sense. Now we move to a very important institution related to art and culture. And it has been in the news quite a lot recently because of a controversy. But let's talk about the question. I made this question categorically very difficult. And this basically is an incorrect question. Which of the statements is incorrect? But more than that, you should know what is called as visual learning. Visual learning is very, very important because we tend to hear a lot of things. We tend to study a lot of things, but sometimes we don't learn by looking. And this is very, very important. So the emblem of the Lalit Kala Academy is derived from the Ashokan capitals. The animal on the emblem is the Dholi elephant, which the ensign, with basically ensign on it, of the Ashokan Chakra. Take your time. Which of these statements is incorrect? The point of the matter is, it's a very interesting question just based on one simple emblem of the Lalit Kala Academy. What is the symbol of the Lalit Kala Academy? I give you 30 seconds to think about it. Come on. Think of it. Okay. Now, I will show you the emblem and everything will automatically make sense. This is the emblem of the Lalit Kala Academy. The context is that the chief of Lalit Kala Academy, his powers have been curbed quite a lot in the past 5 to 6 weeks because of certain decisions he took. He did not take Ministry of Culture's what we call as basic advice and decisions very seriously. So his fiscal and what we call as appointment powers have been taken away. And that is the context of being it in the newspaper itself. But this is the emblem. Now, all very keen observers of art and culture would automatically realize that yes, this is an Ashokan capital. Yes, this is an Ashokan capital, which is the one lion configuration which was found along with 1, 2, 3, and 4. But this is a lion. Therefore, it is not the Dholi elephant. Remember that the Lalit Kala is the ensign on it, and there are what are called ducks made on the what we call as lower abacus, but the main capital figure is actually a lion. So therefore, the emblem of the Lalit Kala Academy is derived from Ashokan capitals. Totally correct. But when we talk about the ensign and the elephant, it is incorrect. So therefore, this is the incorrect statement. Here the answer becomes B, which was the statement incorrect? The second one. This is a very interesting way. This is how what you call as visual learning. You would never ever check the ensign or what we call as the symbol of the Lalit Kala Academy. But because it was being in the news quite a lot, it is interesting and important that we go through Lalit Kala Academy, Sangeet Natak Academy, and the other institutions. For example, the Sahitya Academy. These three, at least the symbols should be in your mind because this is a very realistic question. Nobody can say, why did they ask the ensign? Why did they ask the ensign? You can see the question is from the newspaper. But I made a question in such a way that it's not checking your current affairs part, but it is checking your static part. That way, it becomes equally important to understand that sometimes questions can be made in this way. So remember, static and current are not exclusive to each other. They are interconnected to each other. And this is a very important example of that. With this, let's move to the next question. The India TB report 2024 is published by, again, one easy question after one difficult question. This can again be made in different ways, but I gave you a very straightforward question. But in the context of the examination, have to pay a lot of attention. What is the answer here? In National Tuberculosis Institute, the Ministry of Health, the International Tuberculosis Research Center, and the Report International. All of them are related to the TB. So when it comes to tuberculosis, all of them are related to TB. Now, I leave it to you to decide which will give you the India TB report, because out of these three institutions are in India. So I give you again 30 seconds. Think about it and give me an answer once I'm back. 30 seconds, think about it. Okay. So here the answer is the most uncomplicated one, which is the Ministry of Health, which is the answer is B. It is very easy to answer this and this. And that is why I've taken this question with regards to why you should always pay attention to organizations. Now, there is also a very encouraging development which is related to this article which came in the Indian Express, which talks about that finally after years of creating the infrastructure for TB, the missing cases are reducing, which is that the number of total estimated number of TB and the actual cases which have been registered, that is reducing, in the sense that estimated TB cases which were expected in 26.9 lakh people in India having TB, in 2023 it was 27, in 2024 it was 27.8 lakhs. Now the number of reported cases, this is estimated, the number of reported cases have come closer, in the sense it is 24, 25, and therefore even if you add private sector, you are now getting a number where the missing cases are going away. Missing cases means the ones who are not getting treatment or left treatment or somehow did not come within an institution, be it public or private. And therefore this article becomes important because it tells us that the missing cases are shrinking. 95% of all people who are reported with TB got treatment also, and in that sense it is very, very important. This is a very interesting question and a very, very straightforward thing, that somehow we know estimated numbers, but the estimate and the actual the gap was very big. That has reduced significantly, and that makes this a very interesting case of how we can make sure that if we have the right mechanism, if we have the right set of infrastructure in place, we can show tangible developments. And this report, India TB report, is released by the Union Health Ministry, and that is why it is important that this question should also be in your mind. Ministry of Health or Union Health Ministry is the same. I hope that you found this question again insightful, at least the article in that sense. With this, let's move to the second last question, which is how many of the given statements are correct? Now, this is related to H5N1. Now, I will not tell you what H5N1 is right now. You see it for yourself, because we have H1N1 also, we have H5N7 also, and we have H7N1 also. So you have to decide which one is it. The H5N1 viruses spread only within wild bird populations. It first emerged in Europe and then spread to Africa and Asia. It has the potential to spread into marine organisms and cattle. Which of the statements are correct? Again, I'm giving you 30 seconds. Take your time. Think about it. Let's see. Okay, come on. Okay. I hope you have made up your mind. And here, first things first, H5N1 is avian flu or bird flu as we call it. So this should be totally clear in your mind. Second is that looking at these statements, 1 and 3 seem to be contradictory to each other. In the sense, if H5N1 only spreads within bird populations, then the third statement would be incorrect. It has the potential to spread within marine organism and cattle. If the third statement is correct, then the first statement is incorrect. And here, what the answer is, that only only two of the statements is correct, and the two are the second and the third, which is that H5N1 avian flu has actually started to spread in cattle and has also spread to marine animals. And yes, it emerged in Europe first and spread to Africa and Asia, unlike other diseases. So this is a correct statement, and this is also a correct statement. And the context for this question is actually an article which came in the Indian Express talking about the bird flu now spreading into different other organisms also. And in the US, it has now spread into dairy cattle, and the avian flu has become a major problem for the poultry and the departments related to animal husbandry. Specifically, if you look at it, the spread of avian flu has gone into even sea lions and dolphins, and there have been multiple deaths based on H5N1 in Peru and Chile. So therefore, it is also going to avian varieties plus cattle plus marine organism. This is a very important aspect you should remember, because this is something which you would either get confused in the examination into, but remember, it is not only, but this is correct. Though H5N1 is called bird flu, it is now spreading to cattle. It has already spread to marine organisms, and therefore it is now becoming a major threat, an epidemic, and maybe a pandemic within the animal varieties. And H5N1 also has the potential to kill humans if there is prolonged interaction with this influenza or flu in that regard, and we should keep that in mind. Now, with this, let's look at the last question, an easy one, but the context is very important. The India's Desert National Park is dedicated to which of the following critically endangered species? Now, we can look at the options: Great Indian Bustard, you have Gharial, Asiatic lions, or cheetah. Now, this question automatically becomes easy because of this critically endangered concept itself, and therefore you can get the answer. I'm again giving you a second to think about it. Okay, and the easiest answer is Great Indian Bustard, because firstly it is a critically endangered animal also, and the Desert National Park is related to it. This is a very easy question. You can get other questions related, statement-based questions also on the Great Indian Bustard. I give you an easy question. So I kept the basic out of these 8 questions, 2 easy, 1 moderate, and 4 difficult in that sense. Okay. Now, what is the context for this? The context is a very interesting development where the Supreme Court has given a directive to the center. Now, basically, the Desert National Park is a very important zone for the Great Indian Bustard as a way of conservation. However, in this Jaisalmer, this whole Rajasthan sector, with a lot of potential for wind energy and solar energy, a lot of power lines are actually getting created. Now, the Great Indian Bustard is a very heavy and very, very bulky bird. So firstly, it does not fly very high, it flies lower. But more than that, it has very narrow vision. In the sense, other avian varieties of what we call as different birds have what is called panoramic vision, that they can see down also and they can see straight also at the same point of time. But the Great Indian Bustard, when it looks down, it is not able to see front, and if it sees front, it cannot see down. And what is happening is that the Great Indian Bustard is getting entangled in these very high voltage, very big power lines, and that is in turn leading to their deaths. And the number of deaths of Great Indian Bustard because of getting entangled in the what we call as power lines has increased. And the Supreme Court has argued that there was a panel which was created, why cannot we have the electricity lines buried in the section, underground power lines in the habitat of the Great Indian Bustard, to which the center has said that it is untenable, it is impossible over long distances. But this brings to us another major threat of urbanization and how urbanization can impact conservation. And therefore, a potentiality of electricity in this sector is also becoming a way of killing a very critically endangered important animal in that regard. Now, with this, we finish our discussion with regards to the current affairs quiz itself. I hope that you found these questions useful. I also hope that you will become a part of the UCSC on 7th April and get an opportunity to get a scholarship up to 90% and other prizes also. Close to 40 crores worth of prizes are available. And over and above that, you have been practicing your current affairs as much as possible. For the students who are preparing for 16 June, these things are important because now all of this has become relevant whilst we don't know if the question paper has been made already or not. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next session. Take care, and I hope that these sessions are useful. If they are, do like, share, and subscribe to the channel and spread the news. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.